Could you make the argument that they didn't have to shoot them? You can make it all day, but why start the story in the middle? You know, it's the same thing with October 7th. We could talk about how October 7th was bad all day long. Why are you starting in the middle? So it's the same thing there. He should have never approached them. And that goes for all the other tragic shootings that happen. And I say tragic because they are tragic. You don't want to see anybody die. That stuff's not cool. But, you know, there is something to be said about people bringing demise upon themselves. And these situations like the one I just showed you and others are direct examples of that. It is frustrating to see the response from Trump. This lines up perfectly with what's going on right now. You know, ICE agents are pulling back big time. In major cities, Trump is letting up the steam. And he's taking his foot off of the accelerator, which to me seemed to be coming. I saw that coming once the whole Alex Preddy situation took place. I kind of knew from Trump's answer to the press, I think somebody had asked him what his thoughts were on it. And he said something along the lines of, it's terrible, we have to investigate. And it's like, yeah, you've got to investigate, and it is terrible. I totally agree with that, but two things can exist at the same time. What he did that day was really stupid. To approach armed officers who are apprehending a suspect in a already really tense situation where they're in danger anyways. They're being barricaded by cars. They're being pushed around by people. There's being whistles blown at them to disorient them. People are macing them. People are pepper spraying them. People are hitting them with cars. People are blocking their cars. So these aren't peaceful demonstrations in Minnesota. These are calculated attacks against ICE agents. And so there's a reason as to why they're so tense and why they're moving like that. And you being somebody who has a firearm legally, meaning you have some sort of training or background in firearm safety and common sense with your firearm, not being negligent, you go in between an ICE agent and the suspect they're apprehending, and you involve yourself in that situation. That's effectively unaliving yourself intentionally. To me, that's unaliving by cop. And so, you know, he hits the ground and he gets pepper sprayed. He's still fighting. Officer pulls a gun. I'm not sure if the firearm went off. Next thing you know, there's like 8 or 9 shots in his back. Look, it's terrible. But these ICE agents are under an immense amount of pressure, and they're not taught to shoot to, you know, disable somebody or stop them in their tracks. They're taught differently. They're taught to shoot with the intent of neutralizing whatever the threat is in front of them. And so that's what they did. And Donald Trump, instead of responding in a way that I just explained it to you guys, goes, well, it's terrible and we've got to, you know, look, I saw the video and I thought it was horrible and we've got to figure something out. And it's a lot of people there. Trump is so vague when he explains shit. It's like, bro, can you make a point? Trump is like, well, you got to realize it's a lot of people. And, you know, he came up to the agents and the cops, and it's terrible. And we've got to look at it. We've got to do some more digging, and it's horrible. And it's like, you know, that answer is not going to get you far against all the Democratic pressure that's on its way to you. So really, really bad answer from Trump. And now we're seeing ICE pull back in Minneapolis and other major cities. Who knows if that's a cover-up by the GOP? Maybe they're going to continue in doing what they're doing. But I guess the narrative now is that they're only going after criminals like these ones that we just watched. But yeah, man, you just can't get 1 million illegal immigrants out of the country without being forceful. That's the truth. Unfortunately, that's the ugly truth. People think that forced removing of illegal aliens means, you know, you just tell somebody, hey, hands behind your back and head on out. And it's, you know, they're not going to do that. They're going to fight. And so force needs to be met with force, unfortunately. And sometimes in certain instances, people offer too much force and ICE agents feel fear for their life. And so they do what they do. And could you make the argument that they didn't have to shoot them? You can make it all day. But why start the story in the middle? You know, it's the same thing with October 7th. We could talk about how October 7th was bad all day long. Why are you starting in the middle? So it's the same thing there. He should have never approached them. And that goes for all the other tragic shootings that happen. And I say tragic because they are tragic. You don't want to see anybody die. That stuff's not cool. But, you know, there is something to be said about people bringing demise upon themselves. And these situations like the one I just showed you and others are direct examples of that. And so it is frustrating to see the response from Trump. Vance was a little bit more based on it, actually. Vance tweeted, and this is what he had to say.
Walking out here, somebody sent me a photo of a CNN headline about what happened in Minneapolis. And this is the headline. I'm just going to read it. Outrage after ICE officer kills U.S. citizen in Minneapolis. Well, that's one way to put it, and that is the way that many people in the corporate media have put this attack over the last 24 hours. And I say attack very, very intentionally. Somebody sent me a photo of a CNN headline about what happened in Minneapolis. And this is the headline. I'm just going to read it. Outrage after ICE officer kills U.S. citizen in Minneapolis. Well, that's one way to put it, and that is the way that many people in the corporate media have put this attack over the last 24 hours. And I say attack very, very intentionally because this was an attack on federal law enforcement. This was an attack on law and order. This was an attack on the American people. The way that the media, by and large, has reported this story has been an absolute disgrace, and it puts our law enforcement officers at risk every single day. What that headline leaves out is the fact that that very ICE officer nearly had his life ended, dragged by a car 6 months ago, 33 stitches in his leg. So you think maybe he's a little bit sensitive about somebody ramming him with an automobile? What that headline leaves out is that that woman was there to interfere with a legitimate law enforcement operation in the United States of America. What that headline leaves out is that that woman is part of a broader left-wing network to attack, to dox, to assault, and to make it impossible for our ICE officers to do their job. If
you can't understand what he's saying, it's over for you, all right? It's over for you. If you cannot understand whether you like him or you don't, if you cannot understand the greater good and the grand scheme of things and what he's saying, it's over for you. Just forget about it. Forget about being involved in politics. Forget about your opinions. You're probably room temperature IQ. And regardless of whatever you want to say and being charitable and understanding that ICE could have taken the precautionary measure and not maybe shooting them, and if you're thinking with that framework, it's already over. You're dumb. You're stupid. Why? Why are these people doing this in the first place? You're not Batman. You're not a hero. Law and order is a thing for a reason. That's why we're able to enjoy the benefits and the freedoms of this country. If we didn't have law and order, well, we would not live in a first world country. For our country to prosper, for our economy to be bolstered the way it is, for us to be the world's superpower, we need to make sure we have a country with order. And that means not impeding federal law enforcement in their investigations, regardless of how abrasive or how, uncharacteristic it may seem for them. It doesn't matter. What they're doing, according to the government, is lawful, okay? They're executively carrying out their lawful rights, and they're allowed to remove people forcibly. And if people want to impede their investigation and try and ram them with the car or try and jump on them and tackle them while they're in the middle of their investigation, they have full right to do what they need to do. And unfortunately, in many instances, neutralize that threat. Now, I can recognize on the opposing side of things why this doesn't seem good optically. I get that. But with that being said, that's still not a justification for you to start the story in the middle and say, well, I just feel like. It doesn't matter what you feel like. They broke the law. There's law and order, okay? We can go down an endless rabbit hole of, well, I feel like. Yeah, I feel like that too. Yeah, maybe I feel like I wish these people survived. Of course I feel that way. But you kind of can't get all the benefits without seeing some of the ugly sides of what we need to do to give people a prosperous country. And some of that means law and order. You fuck with the police and you're going to find out. And in many instances with ICE, you fuck with them in major cities where they're being persecuted, like Minneapolis, where people are calculatedly controlling attacks on them on Discord, doxing them and telling their whereabouts. Well, then yeah, maybe they will just use lethal force on you. Newsflash, oh my God, big surprise. ICE just shot somebody because they rammed them with a car. What are you, dumb? What are you doing? Go home. And be honest with you, I've never been a fan of public demonstrations. I feel like they always cause some sort of deadly spectacle or something negative. At least that's what the implication always seems to be. Look at the Arab Spring in 2011. The Middle East got completely destabilized. And I get it. Sometimes the wrong person's in charge. I get it. Sometimes the government's not doing everything they need to do. That's why you do things the civilized way. That's why we live in a first world country. You try to get into these positions of power and make a change. Okay? You do what Ted Lieu does, and you make it to Congress, and then you fry Pam Bondi for defending Trump in the Epstein files. That's how you do it. You don't do a public demonstration and calculate an attack against an ICE agent and then get surprised when you get tased or, God forbid, shot. Are you dumb? Are you stupid? We're in the United States. That's not going to fly here. You want law and order? You want a safe country? Stay your ass home and do things the right way. If you don't, you may suffer the consequences. Big deal. Everybody's so shocked. But that's my take on that. And I was really annoyed when that all was happening. And I get it. There's going to be an outrage and there's going to be a spectacle and everybody's going to be mad on X. And so they have the right to be and they can voice their opinion on it. But we need to be careful in doing this whole kind of demonstration against the government and things like that, because it leads us down this path of this Antifa brain rot where you got people doing things that have nothing to do with U.S. code, U.S. ethics, the Constitution, or anything like that. So we got to be fair both ways. But yeah, I think that's really it.